Welcome to Thinking Deeply About Primary Education, the podcast that gives you a peek inside the minds of some truly inspirational teachers. This week, in the very first episode of Season 2, I'm thrilled to welcome Swain and Tom Garry onto the podcast to talk about teacher development, a field in which you'd be hard-pressed to find two more experienced or expert teachers. Whether you are just starting your professional development journey, keen to move into leadership, or charged with supporting your colleagues in their professional growth, this episode is a must-listen. Before we get started though, I'd like to ask a small favour. One of the ways to help ensure this podcast reaches the many teachers not using social media, and by social media I mean Twitter, because I haven't got a clue how to use anything else, is to leave a review wherever you are listening. It should only take a second, and it would mean so much to know that these interviews were reaching those they can help. As a thank you, one reviewer will be chosen at random during episode 8 of season 2 and receive signed copies of Thinking Deeply About Primary Mathematics, The Art and Science of Primary Reading, 100 Ideas for Primary Teachers Maths, and the Research Aid Guide to Curriculum. So without further ado, welcome to Season 2 of Tadape. Tom and Matt, it's great to have you here, and particularly as this is the first episode of Season 2, and I'm sure people are sick of listening to me and Chris waffle on about stuff in the meantime. But as we always start with our guests in numbers, I think we'll try, this is the first time I've done two people at the same time, so we'll try Matt and Tom, same question, same answer. So my first one is years as a teacher.
So I'm...
the default would you go first, Tom, in all these
questions. That's fine. Yeah, I've been a teacher for 12 years. It's my 12th academic year.
The same. I think we've been teaching exactly the same amount of time. So 12 years. So this is, I think it's bang on 12 years, yeah.
Last year group taught?
Year 6.
Year 6.
Most important year group?
I'm going to say reception for this one. I'm very tempted to say year 6, but I think so much can be laid down in the early years and you can get so much right or wrong in that year group that knocks onto everything else. Yeah, I'm going to say reception.
Yeah, I mean, it was going to be that. So I think the danger is to say year 6, isn't it? And that was a really poor way of looking at things for quite a long time, wasn't it? So, I mean, I would say reception. I would say UIFS as a phase. If I can't have the same answer as Tom, then I would say year 1, because then we're really securing phonics in year 1. And so I'd say that phonics in particular, and that year in particular, if you think about our main goal in primary school, to teach them to read, then I'd say if I can't have reception, then I'd definitely say year 1. Nice,
solid answers. Favorite year group?
Year 6. I just loved everything about being a year 6 teacher. It's just unique, and I really like that uniqueness, I think, and the intensity.
So I taught year 6 a lot, like too much probably for any one teacher, but which the days of being pigeonholed there, really, if you could get some results. But I think possibly I really enjoyed year 3. I got 1 year in it, and there's something about that year, isn't there? And I've got children of my own, and there's something about that age and the sort of the changes in them at that age, that they move from being quite egocentric to being a lot less so, and start to really develop their own minds a little bit. You start to see that. So I really enjoyed year 3. I know there was, back in the day, it was kind of it was the graveyard year, wasn't it? It was kind of where you'd but actually I did a year there with a very difficult class. It's a really difficult class. I think that's the class that taught me that my personality wasn't quite enough to win everybody over, and I think I learned some harsh lessons that year. But actually, I think possibly year 3. I think that's probably my fondest memory. There's something quite different about that year group.
Nice. Yeah. There's a big change happens in year 3 as well, isn't there? After Christmas time, a lot of growing up.
Yeah, I think it's since having children as well. Like, I think my girl's, she's in year 4 now, and there's just something dramatic happens in year 3 to children. So yeah, I really love that year. It's probably one of the hardest years I've ever had in teaching, and a very difficult class in sort of Wandsworth. But I look back on it fondly for some reason. They're interesting at that age, kids are.
That's a lot of great maths as well. So this one might be a joint answer. You're responsible for the professional development of teachers in X number of schools.
Well, I think, so we work with directly with teachers from probably about, I'd say between 30 and 40 schools. We've got 18 schools in our trust, and then sort of, probably a similar number that we work with beyond the trust. I guess the interesting thing about the way that we work is that we're not directly responsible for them. That's they're responsible to their own schools, I suppose, but we get to do the exciting work and develop teachers over a really big number of schools, I guess.
Nice.
Yeah, it's about that as well. It's probably about that, I think. And we've got a couple of extras as well. So there's ourselves a trust, and there's another trust we work with now. And what's been interesting about that, and I'm just talking, is it's really made us think hard on our training this year, because for a long time we were used to, like, the model for the step was, well, first of all, we weren't satisfied with the variation in NQT training. It wasn't really aligning where we were trying to go as a trust, and so we thought, well, we'll do our NQT training, and so we began doing that. And Tom and I started doing that a while ago, whilst in the program, and then we decided to sort of see some introduction and do a PGCE. So we thought, okay, well, what we're finding we're doing now is retraining them from what we think they should have learned for their PGCE. So there's lots of key things we think they should understand. They should understand, how learning happens, and they should have these basic understanding of mathematics and reading, and they weren't having them. So we, put together PGCE, but what we found this year is that we had to really rethink this stuff, because we'd always been training teachers going back to schools that follow our principles, and are having that same CPD and same training, and so it's kind of sticking a bit more. And one of the challenges this year was to think, we don't always. That's not to say that the schools won't share those. All of those sort of principles with us, but you have to recognise that you just don't have that luxury anymore of knowing exactly where everybody's going to be all the time once they've left your training. So that's been really interesting this year. We rewrote our entire program this year based on based on that idea that and actually how we delivered it really changed this year. It moved away from being just kind of a solely like residential model. So here I come in, do some training for a day. It's high quality, go back and then deliver it in schools, and that was okay when you knew the schools they were going to and you're really familiar with them and you knew the head teachers and stuff. And I think as we've started to spread, we've had to think a bit more about the model itself. I'm pronouncing the question there, but I think that's been really interesting for us, kind of moving how it started off as being about the trust, and being about getting the very best teachers in our trust trained as well as we could, as quickly as we could, as consistently as we could, and how we've had to sort of think differently when we're less, there's just more people. We need to scale up, really. Just I'll be quiet.
No, I love your model, and I think we'll get into it in quite a lot of depth across this chat. And my next question was going to be trying to guess how many teachers you were responsible for. But if you've got 30 or 40 schools, there's no way you can imagine that. So don't even worry about that one. And
I think that's okay, can't we? I think it's about. I think we've got. So we wrote an NQT plus 1 program a year or so before they did it, because we wanted a 3-year program. We wanted a PGCE to NQT to plus 1. We wanted that. We wanted to train them in maths in 3 years, not 1. That was our thinking. And the same with everything else. So we've got maybe 70 or 80 NQTs, and then about 30, 40 plus 1s. But then we also produce training for our own schools, and so we don't just train the sort of new teachers. So that training goes out to our schools. So I imagine at times we're training quite a few more. There's quite a few hundred in our trust. It's odd, really. So they listen to us, to be honest, so much. But yeah, it's quite a few these days. It's quite a few.
Yeah, I think the more teachers, the better, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And then the last one, tweets.
I was to check this. I wonder how you checked it. How many you've sent?
Yeah.
The way I find this out, I couldn't work out to find this out.
Yeah, Kieran taught me how to do this earlier, so I had a look, and I was 1,296, which I thought sounded like quite a lot, but Kieran informs me maybe it's not. Is that right, Kieran?
That's as far as I can tell, that's the record lowest we've had.
How do you find out, Kieran? I'm just literally looking live on air here. I don't even know how to find this one out.
If you go to your profile and then start to scroll up, it'll be the number at the top.
Crikey, Mike. Right. You keep talking.
While Matt's finding his number, I'm definitely a bit of a Twitter lurker, and I think quite a lot of the time I'll think about tweeting something and then I'll just decide not to, or think about commenting and maybe not. But the other interesting thing that I found out is that 1,296 tweets. That's 36 squared, or 6 to the power 4. So there you go. There's a bit of maths for you for free.
4,095 tweets.
Nice.
It was surprising me, really. I don't actually share much. I just tend to just comment on stuff, but I'm a bit less of a lurker than Tom. But I just tend to, I don't think I'm ever going to get loads of followers. I think I've got a couple of thousand now, but yeah, I'm also surprised I've got any, to be honest. I generally just sort of debate with people on there, and that's about it. But I've become a huge fan of Twitter actually in the last couple of years.
Nice.
So not many. 4,000, is that good? Kim, is 4,000 good or bad, or what's that?
I've just gone over 4,000 myself, so I reckon we're okay.
That's a reasonable amount to tweet, isn't it? That's what I feel.
But I love the Tom's as a special number, because I always look out for, I want this tweet to be a square number, or this tweet to be a triangular number, but that's pretty awesome. So you guys are head and deputy of the Step Ahead teaching school at Step Academy Trust. Mathematics aficionados and advocates of fair and proper professional development for teachers. Tell us about your respective journeys and how you got here.
Sure. So, so I've been teaching for 12 years, as I said. So my first year after qualification, I actually went and taught abroad. So I taught in Poland for a year, came back and got a job in a school near Ilkley in West Yorkshire. I was living in Leeds at the time, and that was a sort of one-form entry school in a fairly rural area, and it was a lovely place to work, a great place to learn to be a teacher. I think I was definitely one of the youngest members of staff by a few years, and so had a lot of really experienced colleagues to learn from. So that was sort of the first 5 years. And then after that, I moved down to London and took a post at what was then Gloucester School. It's now called Angel Oak Academy. And that was at a point when it was in a really difficult position, a failing school, I guess, to use the parlance. I went from being sort of one of the younger and sort of less knowledgeable members of staff to being one of the maybe not quite older, but certainly more experienced members of staff. And I was given the responsibility of leading maths at the school at that time, as well as teaching in year 6. And I suddenly had to kind of get into the teacher development game, because we had lots of teachers who needed to be supported with their maths teaching. And I was in a situation then where I didn't necessarily know that much more than everyone else, but probably just enough more to be able to give them some support. I got some great support from colleagues in other schools. Fox Primary School, who are the maths hub, where one of the maths hubs is based, was fantastic. And Lorraine Hartley, who's a maths lecturer at Roehampton, they gave a lot of really, really good, useful support and CPD to me. I got on the NCTM Mastery Specialist program, and that sort of developed my subject knowledge. And really, it went from there. So, I've always, since moving down to London, so now, 7 years ago, had a role in teacher development initially within my own school, but it's just sort of grown, and I really enjoy it. I find it fascinating, and so that's kind of broadly where I've gone. And definitely went from a place where, as I said, I just knew a tiny bit more than a few other people, but that was enough. That's sometimes all you need to kind of get the ball rolling, I guess, like a sort of snowball down a hill.
So did you fall into maths, or did you think that was something you were interested in anyway?
I totally fell into maths, actually. It's really interesting that my specialism when I was training was in science. In the school up in Yorkshire that I was working in, I led science. I enjoyed teaching maths. And I think it was always one of the subjects that I was better at. But when I was moving down to London, the previous head teacher phoned me up, and I still remember taking the phone call, and he basically gave me the option of leading either maths or ICT. And I just had to make up my mind on the spot. And I went with maths. But I think now, looking back at all of the work that I've done around maths and how much I enjoy it and have got out of it, that's really one of those sort of, if the coin toss had come up tails rather than heads, I'd probably be doing something very different right now, which is really interesting.
Nice. It happens quite a lot, doesn't it? But then people don't ever look back once they get maths. That's awesome. What about you, Matt? How did you get here?
Yeah. So so I'm older than Tom, quite a bit older than Tom, I think. 10 years, maybe 10 years, I'm not sure, but something like that. So I didn't start in teaching. I started, I went to uni and studied English. I did English literature, and I didn't really, that wasn't really a vocation. I was just good at English literature. I sort of, I kind of enjoyed it and enjoyed my degree. And I came out, didn't really know what to do myself. I got very fortunate. I ended up doing some work at called a feature agency who basically write features for like the nationals, like the women's magazines and female and all those sort of like all those publications. And I had a real knack for it. I just had a knack for like picking the angles in stories. So all stories are the same, right? So every love triangle is essentially a love triangle. It's this person, and the third person. So what makes it sellable or readable is kind of what's the one thing that makes it stand out. And I just had quite a good knack for picking out what that thing was, and I was a reasonably good writer. So I did that for a while. This agency, we sold like all the women's mags and stuff, and then I got moved to London. I asked to join one of the magazines, and I worked there. And what was really, and it was a bit disappointing, really. I'd kind of been, putting the hours in and the days in, and got to really where you should get to, which is kind of being an editor. So when national, that's kind of the end goal, really. It felt like it, at least. And I didn't like it. I just didn't like the job. That's a really weird thing to happen. I've spent 4, 5, 6 years into this career in journalism. You want to call it journalism, but I like to believe it is. And I've got to the sort of top of the tree and a magazine with a very, very, with a really high circulation. And I got there and I didn't like it. I really didn't like the job, actually, at the sharp end. I was like, oh, I don't know what to do. I'm like 30 years old, and it was a good salary, all the things you'd hope it would be. And I was in London, and in Camden, it was all very cool. But suddenly I didn't like it, and I got a bit confused. And so when I tried TV, and did some work on talk shows. Didn't really like that either. I didn't really like the sharp end of it. It's quite nasty at the sharp end, what we were doing, I realised. And then I just went, I'm going travelling. So I just saved some money up and went away. Didn't really, had a great year, and then came back and didn't really know what to do. I did a little bit of work in school side, and then thought I don't think this is not a good reason to start teaching. I wasn't born to be a teacher, and I started to give it a go. I went to Leeds, funny enough, and trained at Leeds University. I'm doing my PhD, and then moved back to London. Started working in Southwark, and Mr. Tom, where Tom was. I started in the wild west of London. It was. I remember I used to bike to work and get a puncture every 2 days on the needles and glass. And this is no exaggeration. It was just rough hours where I was working. But I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And I kind of fell in love with teaching. I worked in one of the toughest schools, one of the toughest areas. But I made a bit of a difference, and I really liked that. And it was much better for the soul than what I did before. But that school was difficult. I moved, and it wasn't really doing anything for me professionally, I don't think. And I wasn't, I didn't know much, but I knew that much. But it wasn't making necessarily a better teacher. And then I moved to Wandsworth. I was very fortunate to have a really good head. You get that break, don't you? When suddenly one person, it just, maybe sees a bit of potential in you, and they had me on the MAST, which I think is what you did, Kieran, which is kind of the old version of what Tom did, I suppose, a mathematics specialist teacher thingamajig. So I was like, one of the early cohorts, very lucky to have like Nikki Ashton, who was kind of my sort of mentor back then on that. And just really, I showed to be quite a good teacher. I was stuck in year 6, but became a far better teacher from doing that, and a far better teacher of maths. And then sort of supported in the borough for a bit. Got married, had a kid, moved out to Sticks, to Surrey. Was a deputy head for 3 years. Helped improve the school, and then kind of got to the point where the question was, whether you'd be a head. And I didn't want to be a head. I just knew I didn't want to be a head. And I was asked to be a head, and I was. It just wasn't for me. When I was a deputy head, I think there's a real value in being a deputy head. Okay, so I think that you need to have done that in your thing like career paths. I think there's some real value in having done the nitty gritty of schoolwork, of operational schoolwork. Of having been a DSL, having run rotors and dealt with parents, because when you're planning change, trying to improve schools, having an awareness of those and how the dominoes could fall, it's really useful. So when you try to implement change and you're planning change, having that awareness is quite a powerful thing to help you sort of disaster plan it. So I did that for 3 years. We really sort of focused on teaching and learning, and then I didn't know what to do again. and I fell into sort of step really, and I commuted for 1:20 for 2 years each way, because there's a role came up where I could do teaching and learning. I was like, well, this is a thing. What's this? These don't exist. And I worked across some schools in East Sussex who just joined the trust had been quite effective, you know, and helped to move them forward really. Met Tom. I think the first time we met, I think we argued about maths. I'm pretty sure we did argue about maths first time we met.
I remember it vividly. Yeah,
pretty violent arguments about your maths lesson. But then soon after we became sort of friends, and I was still in the school, and just like Tom, still one foot in the school. You know, I was still helping at school level as well. But over time, my job just got bigger. We started training more people, and so more was asked of us. And I think maybe last year, was it Tom? We just went full time, the two of us, and started to just train teachers really. And the trust were kind of happy to back that. They saw the impact, I guess, hopefully we're having, and kind of, you know, making the quality of teaching, the teacher training sort of where we're putting the emphasis where we wanted it to be, around sort of the high leverage, basic parts, mechanics of teaching, as opposed to sort of flights of fancy. And that kind of leaves me here. Now we're kind of full time in a team of four of us now. Charlotte McKechnie, the Queen of Phonics. Quite an amazing girl, actually. Verity Griffin, also incredible individual and teacher educator. We're just quite fortunate now, so with these guys. And I'm sure we'll talk about this later, but as of next year, I thought we have to get a little bit bigger again, because we've just been designated at hub status, which is so that's where I'm now. I'm sitting as deputy head of the school, 4 people in it. I love to get the numbers wrong, 4 people in it. However, we do probably educate quite a few teachers. So it's been a bit weird. I'm not as straightforward as Tom's.
Yeah, I think I did the maths course 2 years in, and it
we
was
in the same cohort, Kieran.
2010 cohort down in Canterbury. But it was a game changer, you know, because shortly after that, after I finished that, I got to go to Shanghai and stuff, you know, become an SLE. And, you know, it was like Tom's. If I hadn't done that, where I am now, it would be a totally different place. But I've never met anyone who did it, who doesn't know their onions, you know. It was really high quality, focused on the...
It was, wasn't it? Yeah. I mean, I remember the maths, and I was very fortunate. I think there's probably, for me, like the game changer, possibly the teacher could probably have an argument with Tom once, you know. but yeah, I think that the MST was such a different type of teacher training, so in depth, and it was well designed. I can't remember exactly how it was designed, but it's designed well enough for me to do more than understand it and to practice it. And I think there's lessons to take from that, you know. And definitely made me a far better maths teacher, and allowed me to make other people better maths teachers. So yeah, it was really good. I mean, I failed to remember the details now, to be honest, but I remember finding it challenging, and it also seemed to understand that you had to walk away and do something. You had to change my practice. It seemed to have a grasp of that, like quite a long time ago, when people weren't really thinking about that stuff.
Yeah, because I think the assignment was an action research project written up.
Yeah, it was.
In 2 years. So yeah, it was definitely.
I've got a story on that. Can I just tell you the story?
Yeah, of course.
So when I did that, I did mine on examining interventions, like interventions in primary, an intervention primary. I don't know what the intervention was now, but I can't remember what it's all about. That was the initial plan. You know, you come up with the initial plan. Here's what I'm going to do, and it seemed like this is the line of inquiry I'm going to follow, and and actually what came from it was that I ended up looking at, I think when I was just trying to explore phase of coming up with the project, I was kind of, I went to look at the current interventions in the school, and I ended up being distracted by the fact that the children were just, in these miserable places. They were sitting in corridors and spend very little time in their own classes. And this suddenly struck me that I was looking at year 5, 6 interventions. I think that the impoverished sort of disenfranchisement of children that had fell behind, right? And it really struck me, and that ended up being where my project went. And it was about, I started looking into like the impact of last minute catch up in year 6, and that sort of stuck with me really until and actually, I interviewed a lot of children around that project, and there were children that spent like less than 50% of their week in their own classroom, and where they were being taught, I don't forget the content, but they're being taught in corridors with not the same equipment as their peers, and and not with their peers. And it kind of struck me that was something wrong with that, really. And so when I started working in East Sussex, and I met Tom, and in many ways we argued, we were kind of kindred spirits. And at Angel Oak, they had a same day keep up sort of model going. And they had a very different structure there, and they had probably more teachers than we could afford in East Sussex to be able to pull that off. So I had to think, but immediately I was like, that's how this works. Like, this is, you don't, you get ahead of it, you get ahead of the gaps. That's what you should do. And so then I went back to East Sussex and I started working on a model that we could roll it in any school. Like, how can you make this work? How can you get it so every day, if every child takes a bit long to learn stuff, you can find extra time for every child. So then you don't have to like ruin their year 6 for them. And that's what I did. And so it's kind of from there, going all the way back there, the roots of that. And I wasn't like some big social justice warrior, but when you take a step back and you look at what some of these children's lasting, final experiences of primary were back in the days of we must get X% at Key Stage 2 SATs, and and everyone's cracking whips and no one's being very intelligent about it, then it sort of stayed with me. And actually, when I saw Angel Oak and I walked away with this sort of big project of, right, we can make this work in any school, and nowadays, hopefully, we kind of proved that across East Sussex and beyond. And that all came from the maths. That all came from a project that I thought was about interventions that ended up being about the impact of interventions on children's well-being, I suppose.
That's amazing. I remember being bowled over whenever you described it at Brewery Ed Maths. I was genuinely moved, and to think that came from.
Yeah, it came from that. It came from doing so, because you try and find something to do, aren't you? Like, what am I going to look at? And everyone goes intervention. You measure intervention. It starts here and it ends here. You can start to measure the impact of it, and I end up just getting really distracted by it. And then I read around it a little bit. Really, I'm really bad for which research came from where, but I read a little bit around it, and I was just like, there's some evidence around this, like this, it's not all good, the impact of this intervention. It might have made X months progress in X months, but there are other impacts on these children. And I'm not saying intervention shouldn't happen. I'm not arguing that, but I'm saying, is it always necessary, or could you have done something about it a bit earlier? And I've kind of come around to the fact that that's probably what we should do, is maybe distribute that time differently that we give to children. Like, we're quite happy to take it all off them in year 6 and go, we're going to take all this curriculum off you and we're going to give it to you as maths and grammar. Or maybe we could just be a bit smarter about that, really. Yeah, so that all came from maths.
I'm with you 100% on that. That could be an episode on its own. In fact, I'm going to have to pencil that in, Matt, where we talk about interventions and school-wide structures and stuff. But our focus is teacher development, but the teacher development landscape is changing. Could you guys explain, what the sort of big picture changes are at the moment?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think it's a really exciting time to be a teacher educator, and actually to be a teacher, whether you're sort of coming into the profession or you're already in it. I think the big changes are around the early career support, really. So in September there'll be the formal launch of the early career framework, which sets the sort of standard for support that new teachers will receive. And not just in the first year, as the NQT year was, but obviously putting that over 2 years. Much more intensive training, real clarity about what should be covered in that year, and the actual document itself is a fantastic document. More support for mentors, and sort of alongside that, really, that there's the DFE talks about trying to have this golden thread of CPD. So the early career framework is kind of I suppose it's currently the most ready part of that golden thread, but they're also commissioning a review of ITT. And so that's going on at the moment to, look at what the provision is and maybe what could be developed in the ITT sector. And then also, through to leadership with the revised MPQs, again, the new frameworks for the MPQs. So the 4 existing ones are being replaced by 6. Well, some are staying the same, but it is a new framework. And yeah, so, a much more kind of centralized, formalized approach, I think, which I think some people probably don't like, perhaps. But I think certainly from my point of view, what it does is it kind of codifies the importance of really high quality, well structured, well thought through development for teachers. And I think it pushes us away from this idea that when you have finished your teacher training, whether it's a PGCE, a BA or whatever it is, that you're somehow ready and that you're going to be, you're a good teacher, you're ready to go, and you're just going to maybe get a bit better in your career. It's just not true. And I think that's kind of a lie that has been told and believed within education for a long time. That I certainly thought that, in my NQT year, I thought I was amazing. I thought I was such a great teacher. And I look back now and cringe at some of the things that I did. But because I kind of believed that system, and that I'd done my training, I was qualified. I had my GTC number. I was good to go, and I think that couldn't be further from the truth. So, I hope that alongside that, the sort of codifying some of that key knowledge that teachers will need. I hope what the changes do as well is just signal to new teachers, like when you've qualified, you're at Everest Base Camp. You've come quite a way, but there's a lot further to go, and that's fine. That's absolutely fine. That's absolutely normal, and you're going to be really, really well supported going through that.
I think just to add to that, and you've got the MPQs being done, and this idea of a thread that what they're also trying to sort of do something about is that classic sort of teacher plateau of effectiveness. Where he goes for like the first 2 years, and it just plateaus because nothing really ever happens. And the new MPQs are sort of the three new ones that have replaced the M, are kind of allowing that constant professional development. At its heart, it's right, it's correcting what it's trying to do. Now, whether the materials that we've seen are really good, and they seem to have hitting the right beats. So I doesn't say it won't be even better in a year or two's time, or whatever. But it seems to be a much smarter approach to teacher development, not just ECT. Like this, now there's a plan for teachers. So you start here and you continue on this journey. And once you'll pass your ECT, then you can look at behaviour or teacher education or teaching and learning curriculum and start to specialise in that area. Then maybe another before you start moving to senior leadership. It's interesting, isn't it? Because you look at sort of pay scales and the old it's just kind of you're getting all these various descriptors against pay scales, but nothing necessarily supporting you delivering the expectation within that descriptor. Now you're meant to be leading a core subject across the whole thingamajiggy, the whole setting, and yet the last bit of proper training you had was when your first year of teaching. And I maybe did. I'm sure I did some weird leading from the middle program. That's the only thing that was thrown at me back in the day. It's far smart. It's far smarter, I'd say, that as a concept and as sort of like as a structure for than what's gone before. I think it will offer people more opportunity to get better quicker. And we've seen what the materials. Obviously, we're working at the moment with the ECT providers that have been sort of the government, the DfE has recognised, and the materials are really strong. And actually, their understanding of teacher education is really strong across the piece. So on the practical side of it, what it kind of means to schools, actually, is worth saying, is that in the second year, people have 5% release. So now your second ECT teachers will, which is like half every 2 weeks, isn't it? That's them and their mentor. But that's, I don't want to get this wrong. So we are still trying to unpick all the guidance, and it seems to change a little bit every day. But that the schools will be supported with that. There's definitely there's a financial support for that. What's really interesting is that the NQT time that's given at the moment, that often becomes just extra planning time or time to photocopy or mark. That's very much about sort of completing gap tasks and readings and learning, and it's absolutely about that continuous professional development. So it's moving away from that model of your NQT day, nothing 6 weeks, NQT day, nothing 6 weeks. It's NQT day, follow-up tasks, to move away from that sort of knowing it and not doing it to knowing it and doing it sort of thing. And generally, and this is why I suppose we really enjoy it, is it's kind of trying to do less but better. And that's what we've always believed in, really. It's like do less things with them, but do them well and make sure they can do them. Get the early stuff correct, and yeah, so it's interesting, and for schools, I think, you know, it does mean you have to ring fence that time now. You know, that you can't expect them to use that extra half day a week to do other things. They should be doing this self-study and engaging in, you know, some webinars and stuff. That makes sense.
So I was just going to add as well, you know, I think the other big benefit of the you know, early career framework reforms and this idea of the golden thread is, you know, to impact recruitment and retention, which are both, you know, big issues currently. You know, I think you know, the teacher gap, the book talks brilliantly about this, but I think, you know, when the data were last gathered in 2017, basically a third of teachers was leaving in the first 5 years. So, you know, a huge proportion, you know, a huge number of people who, you know, a great amount of time and money had gone into, you know, bringing them into the profession, you know, and we need teachers, and then they were just dropping straight out again. And, you know, I think very often that was due to a lack of support. And I think, you know, the fact that this is now codified is really important and sends that clear signal that this is what you are entitled to and this is what you will get as a new teacher.
Yeah, as you guys were describing, it's funny you said, I was thinking of the teacher gap and how this system seems to, as you describe it, line up with almost the most effective way to train and keep teachers. You know, so it sounds really exciting.
I think if you study the sort of like some of the contents within it, then if there's the idea, and then there's what's being pushed as the content. So with behaviour management, yeah, and getting ahead of it, not just reacting to it, and sitting, you know, squarely with it at the front of early career training. And when we look at the reason for people leaving the profession, then behind like leadership, alongside leadership and workload, that's the other one, isn't it? So it's tackling it in more than one way. And if you look at the leadership programs, well, that's tends to be going. Yeah, there's a lot of talk around workload all the time, and so it's kind of like a 2 or 3 pronged attack to make better teachers and then keep them in the system, yeah, which can't be a bad thing, because anyone that's, you know, I as I was deputy in Surrey, recruiting was just nigh impossible. Like, you know, you want to be able to say, I have this expectation around the quality of teacher I want in my school, but if you've got one applicant, you know, on your third round of advertising, and you can't afford to supply, it's not really how it's going to work. And so I think, yeah, the more we can keep in the system, the better, really.
Excellent. Yeah, it sounds really exciting. So obviously you guys oversee teacher development across a wide range of schools. What is it that makes you so passionate about this aspect of education?
I think I'd say it's just really important. I think it's such an important area, and an area that's been often neglected or done quite poorly in the past. You know, again, there's this idea that you have your teacher training, and then you know, you're off and you're in the classroom, and then it's up to you. And I think you know, I've seen the difference both for myself as a teacher from the support that I've had given to me, but also from, you know, teachers that I've worked with, what a difference that can make. And I think, you know, what's exciting or what's interesting about our roles and what we do is that obviously when you're a full-time teacher in the classroom every single day, you have a huge amount of impact, but over a fairly small number of pupils. And, you know, and for anyone who's kind of, you know, climbed the ladder in terms of management in a school, you know, you become a, you know, middle leader and maybe have a bit more time out of class than an assistant head, a deputy head, and you'll generally teach less, but you'll have a big, you know, influence over a slightly more distant influence, but over a bigger number of pupils. And I think, you know, our roles, it's almost like another step removed from that. You know, we're not doing the teaching, but through influencing teachers, we're able to have a really, really big impact. And I think, you know, over a large number of pupils. So I think that's what's really, you know, attractive to me personally. I think as well, you know, I am a teacher, you know, in that I enjoy teaching. I enjoy doing that, you know, explaining, modeling, you know, all of those things, but I really like being able to do it with adults as well, and apply those same principles to them, and then get them to do that with their pupils as well. Don't know if I've answered that particularly well.
That's,
but anyway,
that's it to me, isn't it? So there we go. What's my answer? No, I suppose I wouldn't add too much to that. Really, I think I do it because I think and this is not sort of a martyrish thing. I just kind of quite like working in schools in difficult areas. So I always have done. I think it's, but we know that the difference makers are the teachers. We know that's what's going to change outcomes. That's if you want to change the futures of a group of children there, then you improve the teaching. That's what you do. It doesn't matter what else you do. You can do this, that, and the other at it. Like fundamentally, to sustainably improve the quality of teaching, and that's what we get to do. And so, I guess from at the heart of it, and actually at the heart of the trust, and I don't want to do too much about the trust today, but the heart of the trust is kind of like a mission to do that, to improve the life chances of children. I suppose that's one of the reasons I actually joined, to be honest. And through what we do, we kind of that's the big levers to pull, isn't it? Like improve the teaching, improve the quality, and that's I think why the trust supported us in kind of a stronger grasp over the quality of teaching. We were trying to do what I guess in some respects the DFE planned to do, it was doing now a couple of years ago. We're like, we need to control the quality of this and this to make sure that the quality teaching is where we want it to be. And so I think that, and also I'm just really nerdy. Like I just love, I'm really engaged. Like I suppose all of us are here in the sort of in sort of the learning science of learning. I just find the whole thing fascinating. I've become so much better at teaching, in the last 5 years because I've got so engaged with it. And I don't think that was even on my radar. That's why I love the maths so much, because I got to engage in stuff for the first time, and then that seemed to pass, just stop happening. And I was very lucky when I joined STEP that STEP as a trust is really engaged in that. And that was apparent from those conversations with Tom and in the schools you walked into that there's this really weird culture where people would talk about things I'd never heard of, and then I started to read, and I was like, oh my god, this, and and then just it's quite exciting, isn't it? It's quite exciting. I've just been doing a load of work on sort of behavioural science and how to create sustainable change and stuff, and that's just amazing, isn't it? Getting to do that, but that's just completely applicable to what we're doing, because actually what we're trying to do is get people to change, not early career teachers as much as existing teachers. You're trying to change habits and stuff. So yeah, the other side of that is I just think it's really nerdy and exciting. I find the whole thing great, and I remember when I first found about cognitive load theory, you're just like, what? Yes, that's clever, isn't it? And then you start to, I suppose I'm a bit of a nerd. I play board games and other nerdy stuff, and so there's a real part of it that really appeals to me, I think.
Yeah, I think for me, the cognitive aspect, the challenge of thinking and helping as many children as possible. I totally get where you're coming from. Those are the two best bits of the two best bits of education in my opinion. Nice.
I think just to add as well, I think something else to reflect on that when we're working across teachers over a largish number of schools now. I think what's really interesting, and Matt and I have both been deputies and both been involved in the leadership of schools, and you've got lots of options as a deputy or head or senior leader within a school to change how people plan, what lessons look like, how you all of that stuff that happens within a school that is down to the leadership team of that school. And I think what's sometimes challenging but also really interesting and and a bit of a kind of like a cognitive challenge, I guess, is planning a piece of development that's going to be just as applicable to a teacher in any school, whether it's a 1-form entry or a 3-form entry, whether they're teaching in year 1 or year 6, whatever the systems are in place or whatever the instructional models are within that school, but that you can still trying to make something that lands. I think that's really interesting, because when you're doing that teacher development as a senior leader within your school, that you and your colleagues have got kind of absolute control. If you want to move from one instructional model to another, if you want to get everyone to model in the same way, you have the power, if you like, and we don't. but we still have to, look at how we can kind of influence teachers to work within the structures that exist within their schools. And I think that's really interesting as well.
It's led to probably the most rewriting and redrafting of our CPD, and we spend huge. I mean, it's all written by the four of us, and actually some of our sort of associates within trust. We're quite lucky with 18 schools and quite specialists, but we spend an awful lot of time redrafting and chucking stuff out, spending hours on things and they're not landing. And we deliberate practice every session first to make it work, and then quite willing to scrap stuff when it doesn't. I think it's tricky. It's tricky, isn't it? But it's and I think what we've got better and better at is picking the stuff that works for everybody, and then allowing them to and finding and having a roadmap and taking that back to their classroom and making sure they do something with it. I think that's been the real shift in us, Tom and I, at least over the last 3 years, is moving away from the sort of I know loads about this, let me tell you all about it, and good luck if that lands in more than 1 out of 30 people, to okay, here's this particular thing that's really going to be really useful. Practice it here, go back and do it in the classroom, we'll talk about it next time. I think we've moved quite a lot on that, and we've changed quite a lot of our course content as well. Like, we used to do stuff on structured addition and subtraction and multiplication, division, and I'd talk for ages about principles accounting and a number system, which is all really, really exciting and really, really useful, but maybe not what you need in the first 2 years of your career. Like, maybe what you need then is the really high leverage, sort of big ticket stuff. Like, you need to understand scaffolding, you need to understand about making links in learning, or breaking these into small steps, or modelling, or explaining, which we're applicable every single lesson you're going to teach. And that's one of the big changes we've made. We've stopped being so boutique about our CPD. Like, it's really good, it was really smart, and you learn some loads of good stuff. You could maybe use it in term 3 for the 2 weeks you taught that thing. And now what we've got to move towards is everything we deliver with our early career teachers, at least, not necessarily for STEP, but for early career teachers, it is usable in every lesson. Like, it's got an application, and we try and recognise that when we're doing the training, delivering and designing it, and to show people that as well, and to allow them to create that, because or else in many ways, they just work. You're not necessarily changing behaviour, are you? You're hoping it might change. It's kind of like that idea of, and I'm not knocking this, but there's the idea of people having sort of like, sort of edu book clubs in the schools and stuff like that, which is great, and 1 or 2 people might read those books, but where's the leverage in that? How do you know that's how do you know that's getting anywhere? I think we're just trying to move closer to, like, how can we do stuff that's relevant and useful and can be taken and used straight away, and that we can guarantee all of them will do. That's kind of where we try to move, as opposed to sort of like, this is really great and really smart, but we don't really know, it might impact in 3 weeks or not, it might not, sort of thing.
So I think you've almost started to describe your guiding principles. How would you define them? I think I've heard deliberate practice mentioned, and leverage is definitely something that I've heard you talk about quite a bit. So how would you guys sort of condense your work into a set of principles?
Yeah, I think in terms of teacher development, I think deliberate practice, I would certainly put that as number 1. It's one that we've sort of looked at using fairly recently. It's quite new to us, but I think this idea that telling someone what to do isn't enough. Actually having to go through the motions of doing it, practicing it, in the way that other people, that people talk about performance professions, sports players, musicians who perform live. All the practice happens before they step on stage, go out on court, and taking that same principle for teaching, and this idea that the first time that you practice an explanation, this idea that maybe it shouldn't be in front of the children who you're trying to teach. Maybe you should try and nail it beforehand. So I think that would be a huge one. Yeah, I think this idea of that question of leverage and what is the utility of the training that we're providing you, is this something that will just be useful for that 2-week period when you're teaching X or Y, or actually is it something that you can apply across your lessons? Sorry, I was going to say the other thing really, from my point of view, is just this idea that I suppose that everyone knows that pedagogical content knowledge is important, but I think that's still sometimes forgotten. Like, just because you know about something doesn't mean that you can teach it well. And so I think just really, looking at, whatever it is teachers are going to be teaching it and supporting them to work through, what that means in terms of teaching it to others, and and what those pedagogies or bits of knowledge are that are going to help your pupils to take it on. And so just really not assuming that just because someone's a teacher, because someone's well educated to degree level or whatever, and that they know how to use a semicolon correctly in the sentence, that they can then teach it. I think sort of not taking anything for granted there.
I think just to add, I think that like so I think we think what we do and what we design is curriculum. That teacher training is a curriculum in itself. So it's not just these things thrown together, like a bad school curriculum. And I think, is it Mary Meyer, because of Gallimouth, which is kind of lots of weird things put together, and that's like not a good school curriculum. Lots of bits that don't work together and don't tell a story, and there isn't a progressive narrative through them. And I say, and a great curriculum, it starts in one place and it builds, and you need this to get to here, and it works together as a whole. And I think we've always had that principle of what we're trying to do. It has to be like coherent. Like, where are we trying to begin? So for example, so in our PGC, I mean, I'm not going to get too much detail. In the PGC, we make sure we nail the working memory model, like 8 or 9 sessions on understanding how we learn, 7 or 8 sessions on phonics. Like, you've got to understand reading. So we're going to be primary school teachers. We need to understand phonics and reading. That stuff is like at the beginning of our journey. Then in year 2, we start to, the simple memory model, Willingham's simple memory model is just that. So in year 2 and 3, we start to challenge that model a little bit. Okay, so just like we teach children, here's a really simple diagram of the water cycle, evaporates and condenses, and that's kind of what's happened. And later on, you see like a much more complex diagram. And so we slowly sort of peel back the curtain a bit and start to challenge some of those ideas. I think, we'll go much deeper on cognitive load theory, and then we'll maybe look at where motivation plays a part in attention. Because originally we just told you it's about attention, but actually the motivation is being given by something else, and we'll explore that a bit later. And it's just kind of, and it's then, like Tom said, sort of spending more time on the things that matter. Like, what are the big pillars of teaching? What are the things you have to, behavior management, is absolutely key, isn't it? Checking for understanding, questioning, and like scaffolding and modeling, and they're the big ticket items that you want to nail. So you spend a lot of time on those, a lot of time deliberately practicing particular pedagogies, and then as we move to like year 3 and then 2+1 year, then again we may come back to them, refine them, finesse them. So we're trying. I suppose what we're trying to do, what we try to do our schools, or we both believe maybe the schools, is do less, do it better, and do it more coherently. So our teachers may not do the flashiest lessons, but they do the good. They sweat the main stuff really well. They're really good at the basics, and they've got a good understanding of why those things are important. That's kind of where we try to go with it. I know the PGC is, I mean, lots of respect to Leeds, but it didn't hang together remotely. Like, remotely as a course, there's some really good bits on it, but it wasn't coherent, and we've really trying to endeavour to be coherent, and for like any sort of school, maybe to have a coherent curriculum. If that makes sense. And I think that's kind of what we try to do. And actually, what I think is what they're trying to do with the new ECT and the new MPQs, and kind of. I think that's the way it has to work, isn't it? Because it work better. The whole is more than the sum of its parts, sort of thing. I'm not saying we've nailed it, but that's kind of what we're trying to do.
No, that makes total sense, and it places how teachers develop what they need to know at the heart of it. You're not leaving anything to chance. You're going to have high quality teacher by the end of that journey.
We've got really consistent teachers. It's really interesting. We go and watch your NQTs, and like they're like, you know, and we're not anti ideas and creativity, but like we've usually got them hitting the main beats of teaching quite well. You know, their explanations are good, their modelling is strong, their handover to the children's good, their check for understanding is in place, they've got a number of techniques, they know how to check for understanding and short answers, they've got another technique for long answers. You know, we've over time we've told that story to them, and we've got them to practice it, and by kind of like, you know, we're turning out some really, we'd like to think people, but do you know what they are? They're miles ahead of me. When I was like in year 2, I wasn't that good. I think I was that good even on my last couple of years of teaching, you know, or at least I didn't know that much, you know. I don't think that's necessarily about bigging up the quality of our CPD. I'm just saying this, maybe that's just doing it in the right order sometimes, like, you know.
Yeah,
I'm sure that people are much better CPD than me or Tom and about, you know, on how to explain something, but maybe it's when you tell people how to do that, you know.
Yeah, I wish I was at the start of my career again so I could go through that route.
Yeah, me too. I can't. Yeah, I think I've learned more about teaching the last 5 years than I learned in the first 5, and that seems the wrong way around to me. But you know.
So, in your opinion, what's the single most important aspect of teacher development?
I'm going to come back to what I said before, which is practice. You know, getting teachers to practice what they're going to do, the moves they're going to make, the words they're going to say before they step into the classroom. And I think just this idea of the know it, do it gap, which Matt talked about, this idea that just because you know that you should do something, just because you know how to do that thing, does not mean that you're going to do it in practice. You know, our habits are so strong. And you know, teaching is such a complex environment that as soon as we're in there, you know, we're forging habits from our first day of teaching, and these behaviours that become habitual. And then if you ask someone to sort of take, you know, what might be one decision that's kind of built into like a framework of 20 decisions that have kind of become like a meta habit, if you like, to then say change that one thing in the middle of that. Just isn't reasonable, and we can all see why we might not do that if we don't sort of deconstruct a little bit, focus on that one particular area, and just get them to run it again and again and again. And you know, and it's this idea as well. It's not just practicing until you can get it right; it's practicing till you can't get it wrong. You know, we're going to keep getting you to do this. Again and again, and I think, you know, one of the challenges that we've had throughout COVID is that obviously our training for the last 12 months, or, you know, almost to the day, has moved online, and you know, and we've continued running our training. We think we've adapted it really successfully, and we put a lot of thought into how we can make what's normally done in person work online. We have continued to do deliberate practice online because we think it's so important, but I think we're also aware that you know, there are just inherent weaknesses to doing it online, and I think when we you know, when we can get back into the training room with our teachers, you know, that's what we want to be able to do in you know, in person, really, because yeah, I do think that's been a real game changer for me. And you know, this idea that just because I used to think that if I showed someone a piece of CPD on how to teach something or how to explain something, I'd just be baffled if I didn't see that in place in their classroom the next week. I was like, what's happened? I just told you about this. I just literally told you how to do that thing. And now I realize that actually it's not about being told, it's about actually doing it and practicing it.
It's giving adequate time to add to that, the adequate time to make the changes you want to make. Like, you know, and even at school level, you know, I look at, and we're both from, you know, worked in quite a few reasonably successful schools now, like, you know, that come from places where they weren't so effective, and like rushing any sort of change, whether it's teachers, whether it's all teaching in school, teaching NQT, like, you know, not understanding the amount of time it takes to make changes. and you know, spending more time on the one change you want to make than the one trying to do 100 things at once. You know, not trying to, you know, we strip down our training. We're constantly like reducing it to like the very, you know, the most essential components. And equally, I mean, and this is just a referencing, I mean, one of the most interesting things about STEP, and I don't want to, I'm trying to be a trailer, but I'm a bit of a fan of some things we do. Like, we don't have like the big 1.5 hour CPD every week, like in schools. It's just, you know, cumbersome things. It's the end of Tuesday, and really you've zoned out by like, you know, even if it's a really good CPD, you kind of zoned out through tiredness by 5 o'clock. So we have like just two a week. They're like maximum 35, 40 minutes. That's so much better to play with, you know. So when you introduce a new technique, then you can go introduction and model, deliberate practice, and in 2 weeks you've done all that. Or you can we just introduced a new history curriculum in East Sussex, and it's been designed by like 5 schools, and the CPD to deliver that with the practice was like 14 sessions long. You know, it was given the time to breathe. And I think often, like, you know, we're throwing too many things at people too quickly, and we're not thinking about how long it takes to get change to happen consistently and sustainably. You know, and not like that sort of like just 3 or 4 doing a good job, but everybody doing it and being competent in doing it. So it probably sits within what Tom's saying, to be honest, because it is about practice and about time. And I think understanding and being confident enough, and I think probably why I like STEP is it's a brave trust. It always was a brave. It's been a brave since I've been there. It's, you know, and I think you have to be quite brave under the old Ofsted. Maybe not the new one, but it was, you know, it was to be able to say, no, we're going to do it differently, or we're going to do this, and these results, it may not pan out for us, you know, was quite a brave thing to be doing, really, especially when you're trying to make a name for yourself. But it's kind of worked, and I think it always recognised that. It always recognised, like, you know, you can't rush stuff. I worked in the East Sussex school, so I moved there, and there were special measures, and I spent a whole year and a half on maths, just like, and that's what I was given, just gave me time, like, just to work on it bit by bit. It's not like results by the end of the year, you know. And then sustainably, that's what happens then is, like, you know, sustainably you've made changes to a school. It becomes part of the, you know, it's embedded within the culture, which you have to get right first, and it's within the sinews of the school, and so it continues. And I think, so yeah, somewhere in that equation is like a lot, just like you were kids, like, you know, just break it into small steps, and then give it the time it deserves if it's important. Right, that's what I'd say.
Yeah. I've definitely got this idea that there's very little difference between teaching teachers and teaching children.
There is that. I mean, like, it's funny that we like to think that somehow is, like, and I don't think, and obviously we are more educated and more expert in some respects, but we're giving our teachers more complex content sometimes. So it doesn't, you know, there's not a world of difference, is there, really? It was the first time you've heard about, like, you know, you've used Willingham's simple memory modeler, and then it's the first time, isn't it? It's like, so you need the simple version.
Yeah, I think what's really nice about that similarity as well is that, you know, we get to practice what we preach, and we get, you know, sort of a bit meta in our training, and we'll say, right, you know, we've just done, you know, we've just done this bit of retrieval with you from the last session. Why have we done that? And you know, how could you take this back into your schools and do that? Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's probably broadly true of a lot of teaching, really. You know, I think, you know, the differences between, say, teaching in the early years and teaching in year 6 or primary to secondary are often set up as very different, and I think that there's often, you know, much less difference there than you might think, or than a lot of people think. And I think, yeah, the same is true of teaching teachers.
Yeah, just everything you're saying tonight can be referenced back to what we do in school with the kids. Yeah. It's a good way to think about it. One thing I've noticed during this pandemic is the amount of time I actually need for CPD, you know, because I moved my CPD online, and I don't want people on the screen for an hour. So I've been doing 30 minutes, and I've got just as much across. But like you say, being really streamlined, and that's definitely something I'm going to take forward, you know.
That's been fascinating for us. We've gone hard into booklets last year or so, for take, you know, just going to take something out and work on something, and actually that's been one way of managing that, like the screen time, because there's been a steep learning curve this year trying to get this to work properly. I think Tom and I will be in agreement, if we had a choice, we do smaller pieces of CPD more regularly. That's always what we wanted to do. That maybe isn't the way it can always work, but ideally you'd rather do half a day or an hour every week, or than doing a day every sort of 6, so to speak. But yeah, that's been a real challenge, like moving online. I think we've found we're getting better at it. Can do breakout rooms, quite good at that. And we've started, we've learned to let people turn the cameras off and just listen to us. Like, you can get a bit precious, can't you, about like attend. But if you use your question right, you can keep them on the ball. So we've got better at that, but it is interesting, isn't it? Like, with knowing you've got less time and knowing they've got less chance of hanging in for an hour and a half.
But I think what you said about doing less as well, like, that's definitely what we found. And I think, where we have tried to introduce, that time to get off the screen, to reflect, to write in a booklet, or to read something, read an excerpt or something like that, or do a bit of scripting, which is one form of deliberate practice we do quite a bit of. And I think what we've realized, actually, and I'm sure this is something we'll take back into our in-person training when we're sort of back off Zoom a bit more, that what in person we would have been, say, 1 hour of content. Now that we're online, we're almost like, we think this needs to be 2 hours of content. And then when we go back to the training room, I think we'll want to try and keep that, and that idea of doing less, narrowing down, and giving more time, and that time to reflect and breathe.
Excellent. And so I think you alluded to this earlier on, Matt, because we know from studies, such as those by Kraft and Papai, that not all schools grow their teachers equally. What is it the schools that are strong in this area do so well?
I'd say that there's a certain relentlessness, and it's kind of inbuilt into the school culture around professional development. And I think, I talked earlier about when I started at Angel Oak, which is the designated teaching school, when it was Gloucester School. And we did have a fairly young, fairly inexperienced staff. Many of the staff had just joined the school, so were quite new. And the head at the time, Tim Mills, who still works within STEP, he's one of the executive directors of primary. He introduced this idea of these 2 45-minute, staff meetings, sort of shorter sessions that Matt was talking about. But there was just this relentlessness, this idea, we need to always be developing. We always need to be improving, so that we can do the best for this group of children. And actually, at the time, this group of children who had been absolutely failed in their education. I was teaching year 6 at the time, and, these were children who, for a variety of reasons, had a very, very, very poor educational deal. And so, I think that there has to be just a relentless drive. And the thing is, I don't think that can ever stop. I think, an Angel Oak, it is now outstanding, although, that's obviously not everything. And, it gets good results. It's an incredible school. And I still, I was there today. I still love being there. But that focus on development hasn't stopped. The staff are very, very expert now. There are still teachers there who have been there for that sort of length of time. But it's this idea that we can always get better. We can't ever rest on our laurels. We never stop developing. We never get to the point where we think, I'm good enough. So I think that's the biggest thing for me, I would say.
Yeah, there's a problem with always following you with these answers. I've got to, damn it.
So maybe we should A and B it a bit more, switch it up.
Yeah, cheers for that. No, I think, I think, Tom, I think there's nothing worse than a school that's always done it this way. I think that really drives me mad. Any teacher or anyone that's kind of this is how we've always done it. We can't be in that mindset, surely. As teachers, especially in a generalist profession like primary, when you're teaching 12 subjects, I think that it has to sit within leadership, doesn't it? It has to sit within leadership of the school. If in my experience of working with schools in general, that schools will, when schools fail their the children that attend there, then it sits with leadership, right? It always will do, it has to, doesn't it? Because they're all making decisions. And so for me, like, leadership got to understand the importance of teaching and learning. They've got to understand that that's what will drive outcomes, that's what will make differences, and they have to engage with curriculum a bit more than not at all. And they need to be they need to understand that it's those things that they're the two levers to pull to improve things, and that's where the folks need to cut away the chaff for everybody else. So, I'm not all about reducing workload for workload's sake. I don't think you can't reduce everything, but you can make people use their energies in different ways. And so cut away the stuff that's not useful and not making a difference, and let them spend their same hours on things that are important and will make a difference. And that could be removing, and it depends on the school and the cohort, really, couldn't it? But don't have staff meetings full of operational stuff. And what a waste of everyone's time. You can something you put in an email, and think about every opportunity you can get to cut away the fluff, to give people time to engage in the more important stuff. Because people, when we understand that, means you understand that teaching is a thing to work on and improve. And that's really, then you've got that culture that's evident, where teachers are thinkers and talkers and reflectors, because they've got time to do these things. It's when you wall them in with like just nonsense, that these intelligent people who've done degrees, who enjoyed thinking and enjoyed being challenged, suddenly end up being like just busied doing boring stuff and following rubrics and sort of nonsense lists, as opposed to sort of being able to just focus on the nuts and bolts of applying, of getting better at the stuff in the classroom. So I think maybe my answer within that is within leadership. It sits the leadership, and it's the leadership's understanding of where to focus teaching energies, really. And where to focus their energies, I guess. I mean, of course schools have rotas, of course schools have Christmas fates, but there's ways they shouldn't fill up your staff meetings, especially if you've only got 6 a term. You shouldn't have one on the swimming gala, whatever it is. Something you put a bullet in. So it makes sense. I will say it's the leaders. I think it does. I mean, it can't be on anyone else, can it? They have to be accountable. And then there's leaders. So in good schools, leaders are accountable, and those that are less effective, there's more of a blame game going on. And it's more on the teachers, it's more on the year 6 teacher, year 2 teacher, year 5 teacher. And so for me, sort of maybe the leaders understanding what that the most important part of their job, probably beneath safeguarding, is improving teaching and learning.
Yeah,
good answer. It's an answer, isn't it? So
no,
I get it sucks going second, I realise. but I'll continue with it. He is my boss.
No, I'm with you 100%. Because you don't get to think deeply about variation theory or question selection if you've got too much paperwork to do, or if you've got to think about, like you say, writing the script for the school play.
Yeah, I've done that. Exactly. Just that sort of stuff. That's not changing. I mean, okay, I like drama. I think there's a value to it. So I'm not saying that at all. But yeah, it is about just, if it's not helping, like while they're doing it, but schools are very, there's a lot, the people are unwilling to change a lot, or we're a good school, and if we start fiddling with this stuff, we change the marking policy, and I don't expect people to write reams of written feedback, we might slip and be in trouble, as opposed to asking what the purpose of that and what impact does it have on the children. If it doesn't have an impact, and maybe spending our time doing something else might have more of an impact, we should probably do that.
Yeah, nice. And then Tom, thinking about yours, it reminds me of the Dylan William, everyone should improve, not because they need to, but because they can. I think I'm loosely paraphrasing him, but it's something to live by, isn't it? Because I think the minute you think you've got it sussed, that's when you're going to get slapped in the back of the head, and you soon realize you haven't.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's and I think there's a real arrogance in that, and and sometimes it's there might be lots of reasons why someone might think that, and I think often it's probably actually fear, fear of being told that you're not a good teacher, or if someone comes along and says that you need to improve, that's a judgment on you. So I think again it's down to that school culture and how that's communicated. But I think that has got to be the message, that when you're starting out, you are not going to be very good at this. There'll be things that you're quite good at and things that you really, really struggle with, and that's fine. And we're gonna support you to get better. But don't think for a minute that you've got it nailed. And I think, thinking back to myself, and I said before that how amazing an NQT I thought I was. And I think part of that is down to some of the things which I thankfully now are going out, like graded observations. So I get an outstanding observation or an NQT form that says I'm making outstanding progress, and then well, fantastic, that's great. And I think that's that's a nonsense that I think is thankfully becoming less and less prevalent. But we can always improve. We as teacher educators, we're always looking at each other's work and picking it apart and going through quality assurance, because we can always do our stuff better. And I think in fact, Matt, you sometimes pull me up because I can sometimes be a bit too negative about something that I've just delivered, and
it's real thought. I mean, we're a bit too critical on work. It's already been to like 3 filters. We all look at each other's work and literally deliver the session, see how it goes, and pick holes in it. And then, but still, you at the end, like, you're never happy. You're never like, but I think it is creating that sort of safe culture, isn't it? Like whereby it's okay. Like we're going to make a few mistakes on this, but that's absolutely fine. If you need, but we'll get there. But equally, you do want to make it, the chance of success to be quite high. So if you do too much at once, the chance of lots of failure, and then people, whatever you tell them, are going to start feeling they're not good enough. And so the onus is still on you then to break that down into like achievable pieces, and when you're trying to improve things and improve teachers, but then also to accept that they are, even in its most granular form, we're going to make the odd mistake, and that's cool. That's not a problem, because that's kind of what we do here, and we're just all about like trying things out, getting a bit better, reflecting, and I think that's the point I'm trying to make here.
No, I think what's really hard as well is the messaging of that, because what's really important to bear in mind with teaching is that, like, yes, you're going to be supported, and yes, you're going to make mistakes, and yes, you're not going to be good at everything, and that's okay. But I think what's also incredibly important to communicate is, however, your year 3 class are never going to get another year 3. You're teaching, in primary, this isn't one lesson in their timetable. This is them, 8/10 of the time. You're going to be teaching them, and they're not going to get this time again. So now, I think the way that you square that circle is that, that isn't down to the new teacher. That's down to the support that they get, whether that's from their mentor, from their senior leadership team, from their co-teacher, from us. That onus isn't on them as a new teacher, but I think also it's important for them to be aware of that fact. That it is, teaching any group of children for that amount of time is a big responsibility.
I mean, that's where I say, it's where you come back to practice, isn't it? Deliberate practice. Like, you can make mistakes. How about we just don't make them in front of the kids? How about we don't use the next 2 years of teaching that maths topic as being the sort of trial and error space, and we use that time now to do that. So we've got our best, they're going to get a better version of this when they first see it, and that's kind of, I think, what we believe in that. Like, we believe it's part of this is making mistakes and finessing what we do and reflecting, and that's part of being a really good teacher. But let's not make them all in front of the kids. Because and at the moment we're in a situation where, like, they're even less time, aren't they? I mean, it was 450 hours I calculated in the first lockdown. So whatever we're in now, like, 900 hours of school, whatever the heck it is. So every hour's even at least as important as before, if not more. Especially for those reception year 1 children who've kind of missed all the early stuff. So I think hopefully that kind of all makes sense when you think about that. On the one hand, you want them to be to not worry too much, so you try and make it a safe place. You try and make them a safe place to practice, and then so then the kids are not getting like, you're not pushing the first cock up in front of the kids. Like, we all make mistakes in teaching, but I made most of mine with the children, you know, and I've got one of my small bugbears about mastery, and I'm a big proponent of, like, I guess the McCaw sense of mastery, and you know, really in trying to keep them all together, and it is that it can cover up not very effective teaching. Like, you know, I'll give them an extra day for this. We need an extra 2 or 3 days because they need the extra time. And sometimes that could just be because the teaching wasn't good enough, or we're trialing something on them. And so we're having to do the deliberate practice with the kids. You know, we're practicing our teaching in front of the kids. And so we're trying to get better at it, using them as kind of, you know, accidental guinea pigs, so to speak. And so I think that's, I suppose, was such a big deliberate practice. I just think it avoids that. Deliberate practice isn't just, I think for a long time I thought it was like, you know, let's practice. And it is this, let's practice like wait time, or let's practice, you know, various TLAP techniques. But deliberate practice is equally writing exit tickets, or it's equally practicing scripting a conversation with a parent. You know, another thing you really don't want to be like getting wrong the first time you do it with them, you know. And so in that sense, it's got massive utility, because you can pretty much do anything as practice. I know I first, when Tom started talking to me about it, I kept thinking, well, this is great, but like, it's just to me something for classes. So when I started going, oh, you can sit there for 20 minutes and just write exit tickets, or you could just sit there for 20 minutes and you can just script the first 3 lines of that phone call to an angry parent. Oh, that's really powerful, isn't it? You know, so that's, yeah. So I think where I was going with this, I was trying to say practice is where you do it all. That's what I was trying to say.
Yeah, that's a really powerful model. And the more I listen to you guys, the more I think I've just been dabbling in teacher development over the last 4 or 5 years. And to be fair, with phone calls, I'll script my own now, because I really struggle on the phone.
We all do it. It's one of those things that you realize that when you know, if you're making that call that you're worried about, you're saying it over and over in your head. You know, if you're, you know, writing a letter to your noisy neighbour, you'll write 5 drafts until you've got it just right. And so I think it's extending what we do anyway.
I've scripted the whole podcast.
So, and it could be that this is just the reverse, but are there any pitfalls that those schools who struggle to develop their teachers fall into, and then any aspiring leaders who are listening should probably try and avoid?
Do you want to go first, Matt?
No. I'm thinking on this one. I'm not trying to give the same answer.
I would say, and so maybe this is a bit left field, Matt, so that might be helpful. And I think this is a trap that I fell into, and this is I don't know if this fully answers the question, but maybe. I think I used to be a real believer in using recruitment as a powerful lever to driving improvement in schools, and being really focused on always attracting the best candidates. You know, we'll get the smartest candidates that we possibly can. We'll get people who've been to Oxbridge and Russell Group universities. We'll get people with firsts and masters and PhDs, and we'll get really, really smart people into our schools. Now, I think that can be a really useful model, and you know, and I do actually think that you know, we should set the bar high for important. However, I think the danger is that you sort of fall into a trap of thinking that if I've got teachers who aren't as good as I want them to be, I'm going to spend all my time sort of measuring them rather than developing them. And I think some leaders spend so much time trying to evaluate how successful their teachers, you know, and I mean, that is incredibly difficult and problematic to do. And, you know, and Dylan William, you know, talks about this, and, you know, the fact that, you know, even, you know, really well, people who are very well trained at observing teachers, there's not a good level of reliability in their judgments. You know, really, we can't go in and watch a teacher and see if they're and tell if they're any good very well. So I think so many teachers, I'm losing my thread now. So many leaders focus on evaluating teachers, identifying the poor ones who actually may not be poor, and then, you know, moving them to a different year group, and then bringing in someone who's great. But actually, you know, it's this idea of just focus less on that and focus more on development, always on more on development, train them more, support them more, help the teachers that you've got to get better. Because I think, you know, again, coming back to, you know, recruitment, you know, we're not in a situation nationally where we've got people clamoring at the door, desperate to become teachers. You know, if we had a load of, you know, really smart people desperate to become teachers, then maybe that might be a model that we'd want to sort of advocate. But currently we just don't have that. There isn't this huge swathe of amazing teachers out there just waiting to be recruited, and we just need to find them. You know, we have the teachers that we've got. So let's support them and let's spend time getting better. So yeah, I think to summarize that, basically spend less time trying to tell if your teachers are good or not, and spend your time making them good.
I think I've got a different answer for this one. I would have given Tom's if I'd gone first. But yeah, no, so I think there's something in sort of like being responsive to the needs of your teachers. Okay, so I think you need a responsive CPD, PD offer to your, so you're going to have headlines that you're trying to push through. Okay, you may have a headline, maybe handwriting, whatever, but also you need flexibility in your system to respond to what you're seeing in the classroom and what's coming through from that sort of that informal data, that sort of anecdotal data. And I think that, you know, the very best CPD is flexible and responsive, and although and not rigid. And you know, I'm not saying you shouldn't plan things well and sequence things well and have a plan, but also you've got to have some elasticity in that to respond to what's happening all the time. And what you often see is kind of like, you know, well, we're going to do these 2 sessions on this and then we're all going to get it. That's just invariably how it never happens, you know. Or, well, this term we've got 6 sessions on it, you know, teaching speech. I don't know what it will be now. Let's just say PE or something, right? Nothing wrong with that. Absolutely justify that. But you know, I'm walking in the classroom and the checking for understanding is not there. But I can't respond to it because I've pinned this CPD down to the end of the year. So it's a, you know, that sort of unresponsive CPD that comes from not really knowing what's going on in the classrooms, or and being too rigid about how. Yeah, you should have, like with teachers, you should have a rough idea of like what the sequence you're going to teach. But at any one point, you might find you need to revisit this or spend more time on this, or this prerequisite slightly missing, whatever it might be. And so you've got to have the flexibility in the system for it not to be like a conveyor belt with no room to move. And so I think when schools get it wrong is when they're not thinking about their own teachers, and they're bringing something in and go, okay, we're going to do this 6 weeks, do this, and then it'll all get better, without paying really any attention to like the classrooms themselves. And I'm, you know, I think one of the, and I've really learned that in working in East Sussex with a really amazing head called Jeremy Meek, like phenomenal head teacher. I haven't worked with some of the heads Tom's worked with, so you know, there are also some other amazing heads who step and beyond, but he's the best one I've worked with, who completely nails that. Like, he's workloads, there's no unnecessary workload. He's in the classrooms all the time talking, and then that CPD is responsive when it needs to be. You know, so if we need to do a bit of work on our, I don't know, so our checking for understanding, then there's room to do that. We don't just plow and ignore it because we're trying to push through X, Y, and Z. And I think that's been, you know, so yeah, something in there about being responsive. Maybe it's all a bit like teaching, isn't it? Really, it's all a bit like, you know, you've got a plan, you've got a curriculum, but you have to be responsive to the needs of the learners. And when you fail to do that, you leave more behind, don't you? So.
I love that you both responded in a positive way to what could have been quite an ostensibly negative question. You know, what are the pitfalls? Actually, you've both gone, this is something that you really need to make, you know, front and center. And I think, Tom, I'm going to be playing your bit back. You know, whenever I need some motivation, you know, about you know, why am I doing the things I'm doing? You know, because you know, that was, yeah, like the whole chat, basically really powerful and makes a whole lot of sense. So I think, sticking with our aspiring leaders, what would you recommend to anyone wishing to develop their teacher development prowess, you know, should read? You know, books, papers, articles, blogs. Where would you guys go to first off?
For me, I think Tom and I will maybe agree on this. So at the moment, I think my so I've engaged with, I've been fortunate enough to sort of do fellowship in teacher education, I think it's called, but with Harry Fletcher Wood. I'd say that at the moment, I think I've learned more about teacher education in the last year in his company, not maybe about particular subjects and domains, but about some of the sort of like the nuances of education working and being efficient than I have anywhere else. So I'd say, in a quick answer to your question, follow Harry Fletcher Wood, read what Harry Fletcher Wood reads. Not that it's all right, not you agree with everything. And this is not an advert for ambition, it's an advert for Harry Fletcher Wood, who I think is probably, for me, the person. If you want to quick in, have a look what he's reading and what he's putting out there. Have a look, maybe read some of his blog posts. He writes a lot around this stuff. Josh Goodrich is another guy. So he's the. I actually had a chat with him today when I was on the phone. Who's, if you want to know more about coaching, so think about the things we're interested in, I would say those two guys. Is that good enough for now? I'm going to go and check my kids. But I would say as a follow, Harry Fletcher Wood, Josh Goodrich, and then read some of their blogs, read some of the papers that they post, and that's a pretty good shortcut. That, because I'm really bad at remembering who wrote what and what which papers written by, by who, by whatever. So I was like dreading this question if we had it. So I heard it on the other podcast. I was like, I never know whoever wrote anything. Tom's really good at it though, so I'm going to give the short answer, leave him to it.
So I would definitely agree with Matt on that, and I've also been on that program, the Teacher Education Fellows, and it is incredible, and that has really supercharged my knowledge around teacher education. I think in terms of books or sort of papers, so I think in terms of deliberate practice, I definitely recommend Practice with Purpose, written by Deans for Impact. Practice Perfect, which is the Doug Lemov and Erica Woolway and one other author whose name escapes me right now, and Ambition Institute's booklet, the Deliberate Practice Handbook, which can be freely downloaded online. So they're kind of the three in terms of deliberate practice I'd recommend. In terms of books and sort of teacher development, especially for leaders, I definitely recommend Get Better Faster and Leverage Leadership, both by Paul Bambrick Santoyo. Especially Get Better Faster. I think if you're a mentor, a coach, an instructional coach, anyone with a responsibility for working with new teachers, that book is absolutely superb. I think it's kind of an obvious one, but just in case it's not, I think Teach Like a Champion. That's a book that I came to later in my career, and it fundamentally changed the way I taught for the better and made me see so many different things in such a different light. And I think, that's such a good template for supporting your teachers. And then I think, Matt kind of alluded to this, the sort of some of the papers that Harry Fletcher Wood and Josh Goodrich might share on Twitter, but Mary Kennedy, who's an American researcher, she's got a couple of great papers, Passing the Practice of Teaching being one, and there's another which name I can't remember, but it basically looks at how CPD affects teachers. I think with those papers that they're absolutely fascinating, but that's when you start to get into that kind of sticky sort of liminal space where you think you've got a model nailed on. Oh yeah, great, I'm going to do deliberate practice, I'm going to do instructional coaching, this is what my CPD is going to be, and then you read that and you realize all the reasons why actually it's not as simple as maybe we've been making it sound for the last hour and a half. But really, really fascinating reading, really, really useful. But yeah, I think Practice with Purpose, Practice Perfect, those would be my two big ones though.
I'd agree. I'm terrible. So Tom and I couldn't work in more different ways. I give him nightmares. I'm the man with like 700 tabs open and like documents open from the 6 weeks ago still on my computer. And I can never remember who wrote anything. I've got pages of notes everywhere. So I dread any question that says like specify some research or name the author of the book. I've got no idea. I would have read it, but no. Tom though, fantastic. This system for remembering these things. I'm really good at it. I'm good in the moment, and it all becomes a cluttery mess After go and re-find stuff for like when I write CPD, I'm like, I read this, where was it? I go through like 9 papers trying to find it. Who said that then? Yeah, it's that I'm the most inefficient worker in the world.
I think you've both done a brilliant job, because I think the people who listen to this podcast are quite avid readers, and you guys have given them a lot of new stuff to go to, because we've got some firm favorites on the show, but it's always great when we hear stuff that actually, oh, that hasn't been mentioned before, and there was a lot there from both of you. So
Right.
yeah, that's excellent. So becoming a teacher is never easy, and it can take, as you guys have mentioned, years to get to the point where, we're treading water. What do you look for in your early career teachers, to get a sense of their chances of becoming great teachers?
I think I'd say, and this may be a bit of an unusual answer, and I'm gonna credit this one. So this sort of comes from a Doug Lemov quote in his latest book, and that came to me via Verity Griffin, who we work with, and she sort of pointed it out to me. But I'm going to paraphrase it, and probably quite badly. But he basically says that what makes a really good teacher is the ability to do some things which can be incredibly mundane, and it's sweating over your wording of an explanation, the ability to practice exactly where you're going to stand in the classroom, and why standing a couple of steps to the left might be slightly more optimal to standing a couple of steps to the right, why dropping the tone of your voice slightly when you give an instruction has an impact. And it's all these things that can appear really mundane, and I think teachers and people getting into teaching often do so for some big moral, exciting reasons. And I mean, I would include myself in that. Teachers very often want to change the world, or want to make a huge difference to people's lives, and you can do that can happen, but it's not always sexy, and it's not always fun, but becoming a good teacher. So I think I would say the ability and a willingness to focus on small, mundane things and get them right. And I think that can be hard when you want to have such a big impact on something as important as the education of children, to narrow down your focus on the minutiae, I guess.
It's almost too good an answer, Tom. Right? I think I won't add much to it. I think we're both in agreement on that one. I think probably maybe the teachers that's not. I think anybody could be, anyone that's got a degree and goes through teacher training has got the potential to be a really effective teacher. So I wouldn't sort of like, there isn't sort of like, isn't a binary answer really. But I try to, I'd like try and avoid, which I think I had. So I'm going to put my hands up this. That's why I think trying to avoid being that teacher that's trying to win Teacher of the Year award. You don't want the one that's that with just sheer will of personality. The class love you and the parents love me is probably quite good at teaching, but it's exhausting, isn't it? And actually, you're not going to get better at the time you want to get better. So I think people are willing to avoid, maybe less reliant on their personality to carry them to to a successful first year or two. But I think that's becoming increasingly less likely as I think ITT's got better. And but I know when I started teaching, I was all about that. I was quite showman. I was really smart, quite funny. All these things that that won you plaudits from the parents and the children. And I was all right teacher, but I don't listen to anybody properly for a couple of years, because next door was this teacher that wasn't really doing much, and the kids loved me more, and I got bigger cheers in assembly and everything else. But year on year, the teacher next door's kids did better, consistently better, not for 1 or 2 years, but by the 4th or 5th year, well, I'm exhausted because I can't do it anymore. That she's nailed the small stuff, as Tom said, and I see the teachers that I dismissed early in my career as being dull or boring, but actually what they've done is they'd honed their craft and they'd worked out what mattered. And I think that was my mistake when I entered teaching. And it's an exhausting and unsustainable way of teaching, isn't it? Just to try and carry it off with just gusto every day and sheer your sheer will, I suppose. And so I think Tom's got the real answer, but I would say just maybe avoid that pitfall of thinking it's all about you.
I think I just add as well, and you just said something really important as well, which is just an understanding that good teachers are made and not born. That yeah, as Matt said, anyone who can who's able to understand the content and is willing to work at it can become a brilliant teacher. And it's not about who you are as a person, it's about what you're willing to put in and what you're willing to work on. I think for a long time I did believe that if I were a good teacher, it's because I was born that way, because it was who I was, and it was sort of tied to my personality, as Matt was just saying. But yeah, it's that understanding that it's about the work that you put in.
Yeah, I think I don't really engage in the sort of Twitter debate wars, at least, but there's some science to say certain things work. There's some pretty safe bets in teaching that if you nail these parts, then you'll be pretty effective at what you do. And I think probably just recognizing that we have codified and pinned down some aspects of what we do that generally work, and that it is teachable. You can teach people how to be better at teaching, and just be willing to listen to that. I think it's a danger because a lot of us were educated in a period whereby it was all about the showmanship and maybe other things, and lots of whereas I think recently we've kind of realised that actually there's just certain things you can probably get quite good at, and you'll be effective at taking complex things and communicating them simply to people at the level they require, in an effective kind of inclusive way. I think it can be quite. I also think sort of personality teaching is not that inclusive either. Personally, I was that. So I'm holding my hands up, I'm going to reality. I'm saying I think looking back, that wasn't right for my students. Actually, I think I failed some students because of having that approach to teaching. I'm quite honest. And I wished I'd realised then, there were just ways to get to all of them and to teach all of them.
Yeah, I think you're right though. The system rewarded it to an extent, didn't it?
Oh yeah. I wish you got that standing badge. You were like golden. I was like golden. Imagine like Tom. I'd naturally figured a few things out about teaching. I'd figured out small steps quite early in my career. Weirdly, I'd figured out you need to break stuff down. I got my head around that. But yeah, and once you got that badge, then you were pretty much untouchable until you didn't get that badge. At which point your world fell apart. It didn't happen to me, but I've seen it happen to people where they're like good observation, not a good observation. Every spotlight in the school's on them. And it's all so unhealthy, wasn't it? That sort of period in education.
I think they definitely value. It's possible to be an introvert and model really well and explain really well. So I think teachers now are sort of in a better position, and I think that section will be really helpful to anyone who's thinking about getting into teaching or is at the start of their journey. Thinking about one thing came across really strongly was listening. If someone's listening and paying attention to those small minute details, then like you say, the rate of progress is going to be rapid, but it's diligent work. But I think the more I'm alive and the more I learn, the more I realize that anything worth doing involves that kind of diligent, due process, and really putting the hours in, so it makes a lot of sense. And so your work has inspired many and will continue to do so for a long time, I've no doubt. Where do you draw your inspiration from?
That's very kind, Kieran. I'm not really sure I accept the premise of your question, but I'll go with it. I think in terms of education, I would say, there are some big names out there in education, and individuals, schools, organizations who do incredible work and are very, very well known for that work. But I think, just the idea that also out there are a load of amazing schools that you don't know about, that no one knows about. And I think there's something, inspiring about people who just quietly go about do what they do really, really, really well. And that's not to say that the big names, you know, aren't inspirational either. And I think actually a lot of the big names fully deserve the plaudits that they get, and I don't think they've sought them out either. So I'm absolutely not criticizing that, but I think there is something very impressive in just, you know, being content to be really, really good at something, work really, really hard at something, and just do so, you know, quietly and get that sense of satisfaction yourself that yes, we're doing something really, really good here. Because I think there are an awful lot of teachers and an awful lot of schools like that, I think.
That's a good answer, Tom. That's a really good answer.
Sorry.
I'm not sure. I'm meant to add that, if I'm honest. I think Tom answered that really well. I do. I'm not trying to be evasive. I think, you know, as teacher educators, I think you'd be hard pushed to look past Doug Lamont, wouldn't you? It's the guy that codified it, you know. We might be on iteration number 5, but that's pretty. Yeah, look at the motivated teachers and what are the common threads. I think that's interesting for me. I think maybe he's inspiration in that sense. He's got me to look at teaching as a craft. You know, that's a boring answer, but it's everybody's answer. But it's my answer probably. You know, kind of Tom's, which is far better. Far better. Me, Doug Lamont. Anyway, yeah.
No, but I think Doug Lamont's an excellent example of someone who is a big name, but is completely deserving of that. You know, has done an incredible amount of really hard work, and is actually, you know, incredibly, you know, self-effacing. You know, not in it for the plaudits and things like that. You know, he just does something really good, put it out there, and is quite rightly, you know, had it shared really, really widely.
I think, Matt, you have been in a really difficult position all night because Tom's knocking all these answers out of the park, you know, every time.
What are you suggesting, Kieran?
I think we've done equally a brilliant job, but you know, but when some of the profundity in the first answer, you're like, well, where do I go from here?
Oh, that one just go for the Lamont, man. Just have Lamont. Great answer, Tom. Good. But yeah, I'm also like, yeah, I've also just video called out my eyes are like sources. This is my 8th hour on video, so but it's been brilliant actually. It's been a nice way to end the day because most of it's a bit business, so to speak. This has been really nice.
Yeah, it's been fantastic. Do you have any final advice for school leaders?
I think I'd say, and again, I know I sound like a broken record. If you're not looking at deliberate practice in your professional development in one way or another, you're missing a bit of a trick. So, you know, go away and just read Practice with Purpose. You know, it's free to download online from Deans for Impact, and just have a read of that and just think about how you can start getting some of that happening in your PD. And it can be in a very, very small way initially, you know, largely theoretical sessions with bits of practice at the end. You know, and it can be very light bits of scripting and things like that. But that would be my biggest tip, even though that's probably not a big surprise.
No, I would say, I suppose, for leaders, I guess, I'd take stock of what you're doing and how you're asking teachers to spend their time beyond the classroom, and ask yourself, is that the best use of their time? You know, and is that the best use of the time we want to continually improve teaching and learning? I think that's something I've done more and more, and I know that, and I now work with, you know, so Jeremy makes a great example of leaders that's all they ever do. It's like, you know, okay, where is there more opportunity to focus on development of teaching and learning, and teaching in particular, or on curriculum, which of those two may be. I think just do that and then be a bit brave. You know, what I would say actually, just to the people out there, I've been to a few of the new Ofsteds, and it pays to be brave. It pays to bet on your teachers and bet on your curriculum, and to be willing to sort of cut away the stuff that's not having a bigger impact. It's a Pareto principle, isn't it? Like 20% of the things have 80% of the impact. Just try and, you know, that 20% of things is teaching, basically. It's being on and teaching, isn't it? So my advice would, if it is, I mean, Tom's right. If you're going to spend time spending on instructional coaching, that's that's the highest yield sort of spend. But then you need to get time, don't you? So like, just think about how you can create some time. That's the only commodity we spend, isn't it? Schools, on kids, on each other, on teachers, and so try and find something wherever you can, and be willing to sort of maybe make some cuts if you can. Is that right? I've got a phone going now and everything. God, we're getting told off.
Excellent. Couldn't agree more. I think all that's left to say is thank you very much, guys, for joining us.
Thanks, Kieran. Thanks for having us.
No
It's been a
problem,
pleasure.
Kieran. No problem at all, man.